So first, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the structure of this session. I think we've got about an hour. I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes, give or take, and provide some demonstrations. And some of this will actually be a live demo of these tools in use. I'll be talking about some conversion utilities we have, editing using texture, typesetting and publishing tools that we have as well. And I can talk a little bit about the future. Actually, I will. I can talk about some tools that I may not do a deep dive on here if there's interest. But really, I want to just make sure we have some time for an open discussion as well around these tools, how they're used, what the future might look like, and how you might be interested in using them, whether you use OJS or not. Through this, I'm going to be sort of focused on just presenting and stepping back and forth between the slides and the live demo using the tools that we have. Justin and the other moderators there, if there are questions that come up, feel free to just step in and let me know, or if there's a talk function, I'm happy to be interrupted through this, so we can do it that way. And we can just take some time for questions at the end. And I have prepared some questions as well that we can step through if people are quiet and tired as they may be. And finally, you can take notes and do whatever you want, but there is a link to these slides, so you'll have them right away at the end. And that will include links to a demo OJS instance that you'll be able to log into so you can try out the tools right away. And other tools and resource lists as they're available. So all of that's available as a package. I think we can send that out after the fact, but you can also just grab the link right at the end and download the slides and use them right away. All right, so just starting off, who are we? So we within PKP, the folks who are working on XML publishing tools, that would be me. I'm the Associate Director of Strategic Projects and Services at PKP. I've been with the group for over 12 years now, 12 and a half years. And I've actually been working in XML one way or another within the group probably for about 10 of those years. My time goes all the way back to doing testing and other things around the Lemon 8 conversion utility, if folks remember that. Testing out and doing some minor developments on the XML galleys plugin within OJS, and even writing a lot of our documentation in DocBook, which brings me back. We have Vitaliy Bezsheiko, who's a developer. He's also a senior editor of Psychosomatic Medicine and General Practice, which is a journal that uses OJS and publishes in XML. Vitaliy works for us actually close to full time now, and he's been working on a tool called Growbid. But he's also been developing his own tools, partially on PKP's time, to support XML publishing. So he's developed a JATS parser plugin that we'll take a look at, and a docxtochats plugin as well. Vitaliy's just a great resource on all of this stuff, and he's really keen on working through it all. We also have Dulip Withanage, who works at the Heidelberg University Publishing outfit that's in Heidelberg, Germany. And Dulip has been working mostly on me typeset integration with OMP actually, and our texture integration as well. But he also works on the HiNPT, which is their OMP book platform, which uses me typeset to manage XML conversion and uses Lens Galley Bits plugin to display XML. We'll be demonstrating those. Dulip and Vitaliy aren't here today, but they helped me put these slides together and helped me put the demo together. And most importantly, they've done most of the work on these plugins and integrations to make them work within the OJS context. We have a number of other partnerships in this, so we aren't working in isolation, and that's an important thing to mention, I think. We are part of what's right now informally called, I think, the eLife partnership. So we work with eLife Publishing in the UK, along with ARID, which is a sort of a content aggregator and disseminator in Montreal, who PKP has worked with very closely for probably 10 years at least now. PKP is working with this group and also CLO to develop a common approach to XML publishing workflows. We aren't working on one specific workflow for all groups, but we are working in this space on developing tools to work within the space. And in particular around editing of XML content in basically a WYSIWYG way. That's what you see is what you'll get. I'll talk about that, and we'll have some demonstration of the texture plugin and some discussion of future plans there as well. PKP and RED work together very closely under this Coalition Publica partnership. This is a national infrastructure development partnership within Canada, where we're developing tools to reduce costs around journal publishing in Canada. And part of this is just reducing the costs required to generate galleys, full text, PDF, HTML, and XML. There are a number of other associated groups that we're sort of informally partnered with. One is the Semantic Extraction Group. That's eLife and partners in Growbid who are working on conversion and the whole sort of conversion space. The Friends of Manuscripts Press group is another informal group. It's actually, I think, basically a Slack channel of folks who are talking about interoperability standards. So this is, you know, how to make sure that these various different applications are at least able to talk to each other and have JATS XML work across the spectrum. And then finally, we are going to be part of a JATS for our working group, mostly just so we can, we as PKP in this case, sort of pay attention and sort of keep apprised of where the JATS for our work is going, but also to provide user stories from our own community to make sure that that's accounted for. So there's a large community of other interested parties out here working on these tools in conjunction. So today, what we're demoing, I'm going to take, from most cases, we're working from one sample semi-representative Word document that has tables and figures. And the idea is we want to demonstrate what we can do now with the tools that we have. If we have a Word document that has, you know, this typical sort of structure, markup, style, semantic structure that you would see in a scholarly article. And how we can convert that from XML, or sorry, from Word into XML, and from XML, edit it, clean it up, and then eventually push it into full text galleys, PDF and HTML. I'm just going to show the document right now, just so everybody has an idea of what the actual root document looks like. So this example.docx file is the file that I'll be using throughout for the most part. See, it's just a straightforward, this is not a post-published PDF or typeset article. It's just a straight up Word document with a header, some bold, italics, superscript, subscript, strike-throughs, links, embedded references, ordered lists, some unordered lists. If we scroll down, subsections, things like that. Paragraphs, tables, more tables, more tables. I know there's a figure here. So there we go. Here's a figure. And I believe a list of references at the end. Yeah, here. So a relatively straightforward demonstration article that tries to capture the complexity that you would see in a typical manuscript that would go through OJS. So we'll be using this to run through the conversion scenarios here. Before we get to that, just some talking about what we're trying to accomplish here, and this is sort of PKP, but with these groups as well. We want to support JATS XML content markup, and specifically JATS. We want to support the markup at sort of the 3 levels of an article. So the metadata, or the front matter, this is title, abstract, author information, the body content, the full text, and also the references as well. We start here by supporting conversion from doc or PDF to JATS and editing and cleanup of the results. This is sort of the approach that we've taken right now. Instead of having some sort of embedded straight up native XML editing functionality within OJS from the moment that you start a submission, we're starting with a conversion step here. There are a few reasons for that. Number one, folks are used to starting with Word and continuing there, and that's one reason there. It's easier for us at the moment to focus on one particular area and get good at that, and that would be the production stage. We'll see what that looks like. We can build on from there once we sort of develop some expertise there. We're looking to provide also sort of long-term and what I'd call like a document-centric workflow. So the idea being a seamless JATS first document creation directly within OJS. And I'm not going to demonstrate that today because that is actually not a reality at this time, but I can talk about it at least. And we will talk about this, especially when we look at transitioning from where we are now to where we're going to be in the future. Through this, we work with partners and community within the environment here to support wider JATS use cases. And in particular, to understand and support the element set that is most widely used out there. So we're looking at some sort of a subset of JATS for our right now that Texture supports, but we need to expand that to make sure that most common use cases are supported. The why we are doing this can be, that's an interesting question to answer. We could talk about this more maybe in the question period too. So the glib answer is we've been doing this since 2005, and why stop now? We've got a good long rut. We can just keep driving on that. That's not a great answer, but it is one answer. And I think it's important just to underline that we need to kind of interrogate this every once in a while, just because we've been doing something and we've been working on something, or we've been rolling this boulder up a hill for the past 10 years. Maybe it's not the thing we should always be doing. But I do think there are good reasons to invest time into JATS support, or just XML support broadly, say, but really JATS support here. Number one is just to support reusability. So JATS metadata is, JATS elements actually, I should say, it is a semantically rich, easily processable and reusable format. And we're demonstrating this now today within the Coalition Publica environment, where we harvest JATS metadata through OAI actually into the centralized RED platform, and then use it in interesting and new ways. It's just a richer metadata format for us. It's also, JATS is it's easy to do research on. It's easy to develop into a larger scale and better usable or more usable research corpus. And again, we're doing that within Coalition Publica as well. It supports preservation and long-term access goals. So XML is a great preservation form. And HTML PDF can be generated and regenerated from these source texts. So, I mean, I've been putting content online since I think 2001, starting with PDF and very poorly formatted HTML. And there are a lot of attendant issues with just making sure that that content continues to be readable. There are still issues with using JATS as the source format. You know, you still have to make sure that it's generated in something that's usable and useful. But it is a much more flexible format for long-term use in that form, I believe. And then finally, this just lets us support new forms of typesetting, display, integrations, and so on and so forth. And I can demonstrate some of that today as well with some of the unique new things we can do to display content and actually generate content on the fly. So just a brief word on where we are right now. So within OJS, within PKP and Coalition Publica, we're working on a distributed and decentralized ecosystem. Within OJS in particular, we want to support these plugins that we have, and these are listed here. And we'll talk about them and I'll demonstrate some of them. But the more important thing is that we support these in a really generalizable, extensible way. So the idea is that we're not sort of hammering in Growbid support at the exclusion of all else, or texture support at the exclusion of all else. We're working to make sure that these are, number one, they're plugins. They can be interchanged. So if you want to use some other conversion utility than one of these, you can do so. The framework is there for you to do that, or will be there for you to do that. And it's just, it comes down to sort of making sure that you can implement the tools within the framework that we provide. Okay, so I'm gonna start, actually, I'll just step back here briefly. I'm gonna start demoing the tools that we have. And I'm gonna start first with creation and conversion. We will then talk about editing and typesetting, specifically using texture, but I have some words about prose mirror here as well. And then we'll finish by talking about some of the publishing and display utilities here. So as I step through these, I have some live demonstrations here that I'll be able to show. Fingers crossed they won't crash. And again, you'll have access to these notes and links to the demos, and you'll be able to kind of go and play around. You can even use your own documents if you like, download the code and all that stuff. All this is open source. So we're going to start with creation and conversion, and specifically start with Growbid. So Growbid is a machine learning tool developed for data extraction from scientific articles in PDF format. Long story short, it's a tool that was developed in France. It's going strong now, meant specifically to do large-scale batch conversion of documents from PDF to TEI. And so right away, we're not talking Word to JATS, which is what we're looking for here. It's a machine learning tool, so it's something that will improve given training, but you have to extend the training quite a bit. The idea is if you have a large data corpus, a large set of articles that are appropriately licensed, if you can feed those into Growbid and run training scenarios, do a fair bit of manual markup and sort of annotation and sort of review of those trainings, you can train Growbid to recognize things like section headers or deal with things like double column layouts or really any particular use case you have, and match that and convert that into an appropriate TEI equivalent. This tool, in order to be useful for us and our particular use cases around docx to JATS, does need to be wrapped in some additional layers of utility. So we need a docx to PDF conversion step. We also need a TEI to JATS conversion step. Growbid's pretty neat and powerful in that it's a web service. It's open source, first of all, but it's a service that you can run on your own server. You can connect to it through the web, and I'll demonstrate that. But you can also run batch conversion through an API, either on the command line or actually through the web as well. It's really powerful, it's extremely quick, and it's fairly accurate. I will note that depending on your particular use case, your accuracy is going to vary. So up until recently, it wasn't used very much for full text conversion. It was really meant for a front matter conversion utility. But we've been working with Patrice Lopez, the developer, to sort of better support full text conversion, and it's coming along really well. So it can support, let's see here, here we go. It can now support lists. I believe Vitaliy's developed support for tables as well, and he's working on support for block quotes. Vitaliy has also developed sort of an included JATS conversion step. So previously, if you were going to use Growbid and you wanted JATS, you'd have to do some sort of XSLT conversion step from TEI to JATS, but that's actually included in the document now, or in the web service now as well. So it's a really big, robust, cool utility, and it's great for batch conversion, and it's great for conversion where you may not have, say, a specific template that you have folks working with, or you have some neat edge cases. It's less useful, I would say, sort of on a case-by-case basis. It may not make a great deal of sense if you're looking to use it sort of for a smaller journal, because it is a sort of a more specialized user tool. It's also not compatible at the moment. The XML it generates is not compatible with texture, and that's something that would have to be worked on if you wanted to use it as part of a texture pipeline. And I'll actually demonstrate how that incompatibility rears its head here a bit. So we're still working with Growbid, and we want to sort of push the accuracy and do more training there, and sort of there's a long-term process there that we're invested in. We do want to sort of continue with the adaptation, and I think actually the next step is going to be releasing the plugin. It's currently in development. It's compatible with OJS 3.1.2 and 3.2. It just hasn't been released yet, but I will demo it here in a sec. So what we have here for a demonstration, first we have this web service. So again, this is a demonstration only. This should link out. Yeah, so Vitaliy is running this on his own journal web server. There's no promise that this is up and online for any sort of production sort of test. But we can see here you have different conversion scenarios. So you can convert to TEI, you can manage PDF, patents, documents. This is all sort of standard Growbid stuff. And again, this is a web service that's just running on a port, I think. You can process full text from JATS XML here. So this is the bit that Vitaliy developed. Just gonna find the file. Right now, you do have to use a PDF file. This PDF is the exact same as that example doc file that we use, just converted to PDF, I believe. So we submit that. We have that, and then this is the resulting JATS XML. So we can see here it identified the title here as the introduction. And again, this would be pulling straight from here. So it pulls this as the title, has a whole bunch of reference points that it sort of, again, manages to match. This is, again, just using machine learning, find sections, find section titles, all that stuff. Sections here. So it does a good job. We can download the JATS result, and I think I've actually loaded that into Oxygen here if you wanted to see what this looks like. This doesn't display the figure. That's a bit of a wrinkle that I can address later, but it does grab the tables out. It may not be perfect. It does the links here. It may sort of misidentify some things. There's a little bit of messiness here, but again, that's where you have an editor to go and do some cleanup here. Where's my slides here? So within OJS, there is a plugin that's available. It hasn't been formally released yet. It's not available in the plugin gallery, but it will be relatively soon, I think. Just do a quick search for Growbid. But when you install it, you just have, it's a super simple plugin. You just have a settings page. You have to specify where, you have to have a web service to use, first of all. And I can tell you this demonstration web service is not one you would want to use in practice. But if you were to run this yourselves, or if PKP eventually runs one for the community, you'll be able to specify the web service here, and that's just the URL that the plugin sort of connects to via API. And then what you get when that's configured, so this is an OJS article. And again, we're just at the production stage here. We've gone through submission review, copy editing. We're going to see a lot of this production stage today. What we have, Growbid currently does require PDF, but eventually this will support doc to PDF conversion. But if you have a PDF file in the production ready files area, you have this little button called convert with Growbid. You do that. What this does is this sends this the document out to that web service, and then returns it, and then you have an XML file here. And then I can download that, and I can open it. It's full on. It's the exact same XML file that we would see here. One little sort of, this is a foreshadowing, I guess, to texture here. You'll see this journal has been configured so it has the texture plugin, which I'll show a little bit in advance. It is not, the output here, as I mentioned earlier, is not compatible with texture just yet. And the big caveat with texture is that it only supports a really strict subset of JATS for our JATS, and it's really limited. This XML file that Growbid generates is valid JATS XML, if memory serves. But it's just, it includes more information than this texture plugin can currently support. We're working on smoothing that out, mainly by just relaxing the sort of the set and the restrictions that within texture. But if I try to edit this with texture right now, it's going to pop up into this texture plugin window, and it's just going to say, oh, it's broken, it doesn't work. But that's Growbid in a nutshell. Again, if you had, say, hundreds or even thousands of XML file or of PDF files that you wanted to convert into XML, you can do that, and it's really incredibly quick. It's a Java application. It's open source. We include a link to the code repository later Vitaliy has also worked on a simpler plugin that I think for most use cases is going to probably fit the bill in a better way than Growbid. This is what's called the docxtochats XML converter plugin. So this will work on docx. And it's just a PHP plugin. It doesn't require any external service. So you don't need to have something like a Growbid service running. As long as you can run OJS3, you can use this plugin. It'll take a Word doc and go through it and identify things like headers, lists, bold, italic, things like that within the actual docx XML and convert that into JATS XML. It's a relatively straightforward plugin. It actually handles figures and whatnot as well. This is actually, oops, that's old. It does support figures and formulas and citations. But what it doesn't support are sort of more semantically rich things that Growbid can actually pick up, like links and references and other interesting things like that. It really, we're limited here by what is included in the XML within the docx format. Here we go. So there's some additional info there. The article, I'll just demonstrate what this looks like here. Oh, and I already have one. Let me just behind the scenes delete this really quick. So again, this example.docx file is this Word document. And we're using a slightly different journal here, the docx-to-jats journal. So here, what we have is convert to JATS XML. So this is not using Growbid. This is using the docx converter plugin. Click that. Nothing goes away. There's no remote service. It just does this on the server. It comes back with this XML file. And the most important thing here is it's actually compatible. The XML that it returns is compatible with texture. So you have, again, this is JATS XML on the back end. And this is the content that it's picked up. So the docx converter can find headings, can find bold, italic, superscript, subscript. It's missing strike-throughs right now. And you can also see it doesn't pick up, say, reference links and things like that. It picks up hyperlinks, but not reference links. It does nested lists. We scroll down a little bit here. It does tables. Sometimes these may need a little bit of cleanup. There's all those other tables. And it actually does pick up the figure as well and embed that within OJS as a dependent file. It picks up references, but not in any super intelligent way. This is just text to texture. It does to texture and within the JATS itself. So it doesn't do a super great job of that. And again, that's just part of the sort of the limitation of working with the docx XML. We've got some plans for that in the future, but for now, this is what it does. And just to show what the article looks like here, this is with no cleanup or intervention. Well, we'll get to this in a little bit, but you can see this is the HTML that's generated from and again, like I said, the tables need a bit of work, and I'll demonstrate this plugin a little bit as well. But I think the figures there and. So the advantage of the docx-to-jats is that it is compatible with texture, where texture is compatible with some of the other display utilities. That pipeline is actually fairly strong. It's a sort of good basic tool if you have fairly straightforward articles. If you're doing anything relatively complex, it may not be the tool for you. But for straightforward articles, it's highly usable. So I'll talk about texture now. Texture is the editing utility, and this is the main utility that we've been working on for, I think, the past 2 years. Originally, this was through the auspices of what we call the Substance Consortium. So again, this was ARID, eLife, PKP, and Cielo, and 2 developers working at Substance. There's going to be a really big caveat at the end of the texture demo here, in that texture development has effectively ceased. eLife had contemplated forking texture once the substance crew had sort of stopped work on it and continuing development on it. And it turns out that it's a really complicated application, and they're not interested in taking on the maintenance load. And neither is PKP. We do have some sort of long-term plans afoot for the editing space that I'll talk about, and those involve ProseMirror, and we can maybe talk about that in some of the conversation component of this presentation. But for now, texture works, and we will sort of, I'll go through a demo of what that looks like. And we're going to support texture within OJS, at least for the foreseeable future. As a tool, it may not increase its usability, but it will be supported within OJS. So just a few notes on texture. It works as an embedded tool within OJS. It's also available as an offline application. So you can use that on your desktop if you want. The Substance crew developed a specification called DAR. That's a packaging format for XML. So DAR specifies how to package JATS XML with other dependent files like figures and tables and things like that. So it uses DAR as its base. We've developed sort of generic DAR import-export functionality within OJS, and we expect to see DAR support actually pick up across other applications. So I don't think that's going away. So you can use texture directly within OJS, but you can also download the DAR file and work with it offline if you like, and I'll show you what that looks like a little bit. It supports images as dependent files, so you can upload images and have those saved as dependent files within OJS. And one quick note, my son just got back from a walk. He is 3 months old and he may scream a little bit. So bear with me if there's any extraneous noise here. Working from home is full of joy and wonder.
We're all in the same boat with you.
Yeah, I just heard the door open and I heard the scream number 1. So we'll see how it goes.
They're demoing the apartment underneath me, so there's lots of sledgehammers too. It's just part of the game.
Excellent. All right, so without further ado, I'm just going to jump in straight up to a hands-on demo here. So this is actually the same article that we just looked at. So we have that example docx file. We use the docx converter plugin to convert that to XML. And then what we have here is this edit with texture, export DAR, and create galley. Just working backwards here. If you export DAR, you'll export the XML file plus all of the dependent files that came from this doc. So that would be the figure that was included. Tables are embedded within the XML, I think. If you create galley, that'll just bump this down here so that you have sort of basically a crosswalk from the production ready stage to the galley stage. So once you're done cleaning this up with texture, you can click create galley and it goes down here. We're going to look at what texture provides us here. So what texture does is first it grabs metadata information from OJS, from the metadata field specifically within OJS to populate the front matter here. So this test article from docx to JATS actually came from OJS here. We can see it. Here's the title. That's in the metadata here. It grabs it, it dumps it in here. Same with the author, Jane Doe. That's added here. We can see that it's just a general WYSIWYG editor. So we have the main text. We can actually make any edits we want. Here, that's represented here as well. We can step through this stuff. We can edit these headings. We can make stuff, whoops, italics, bold. You know, it acts as just a simple text editor, but it has a whole bunch of extra functionality as well. You can look at the article details. So this is the metadata within sort of the text itself. So you have a title, subtitle. This would have been pulled from OJS if we had it. Abstract information, article metadata, and then author information. This gets actually fairly granular here. We have affiliation information as well, figures, tables, so on and so forth. All of this content, if you add to here, it'll be saved, and it'll be saved within the XML file. There's one important note that currently, if you make any change to the article metadata, so if you change an article title here, it'll be saved in the XML file, but it won't be pushed back to OJS just yet. So you still, currently, if you want to use this plugin, you still have to juggle sort of that metadata management. One of the plans we have for the near term, to finish off work on the texture plugin and release it, is to sort of simplify this so that basically you use OJS to manage your metadata and your reference list, and you use texture just to manage the full text content. So that would be the body content. And that's actually the pattern that we're going to extend going forward when we look at replacing texture eventually with Prose Mirror. Every time you save here, this pushes the XML file back into OJS, and it'll create a new version there. And it's all versioned within OJS. So it keeps track, it saves a new version of the XML file, so you can step back and see all of those iterations as you go through. You have the ability to insert a whole bunch of different content here. So this is all built into texture. It's a whole bunch of format elements, paragraph stuff there, all that. So it's a fairly robust editor, and it's good for what it does. It does lack support in a few key areas. The biggest one right now that we just keep on running into issues with is affiliations. So if you have an affiliation in your JATS XML and you send that to texture, it just kind of dies, and it doesn't work well. And I actually think that's the issue that we had seen with the Growbid example that I had shown earlier. So what we're looking at doing there is simplifying or relaxing the restrictions to basically say, if you have something in your XML that isn't supported within texture, don't freak out, still display the XML and display what you can edit, but don't display what you can't edit, don't delete what you can't edit, and don't crash. We'll see how that goes. So that's it. Right now, for texture, sorry. Right now, the current development plans, as I said, we're restricting it really just to the body elements. We have to develop some of the documentation around use, reduce the restrictions there around the JATS validation, and just sort of like manage how that works in a better way. And then also just update to texture 2.3, because it's actually, that's the latest released version. I think probably maybe the last one that's going to be released, at least for some time. And that's got quite a lot of new functionality in there as well. And then, whoops, as I say down below, texture development has ceased. Just briefly on that, eLife have sort of jumped over to looking at Prose Mirror. I'm not going to go into any detail on Prose Mirror today, except to say it's another open source library. It's written in JavaScript. It's community supported. It's actually in use by manuscripts.at, which is developed by Adafon. Fidus Writer uses it for their JATS XML. I think Cocoa Foundation uses it for their wax editor. That's Markdown. It's a general purpose WYSIWYG editor that can be extended for various types of semantic markup. So it can support Markdown, HTML, JATS, conceivably TEI if you do it, and it's quick to use. So that's promising. It's a bit frustrating to know that we got so far with texture only to really see development of it sort of wind down. So that's a little disappointing. We do want to continue supporting the iteration within OJS for the foreseeable future, make sure that the most recent version is up to date and all that. It is a useful tool, but I think long-term Prose Mirror is going to be where we're going to focus our attention. And if I had to guess, and this is an informed guess, let's just put it that way, it's going to be looking at having sort of editing tools from the very beginning of submission all the way through to the end of editing using Prose Mirror in a full text content. So really sort of embracing a doc-centric workflow there. And if there's more questions about that, I can talk about that. So just on the final little bit here before we move on to Q&A and realizing we've got about, I think, 15, 16 minutes left here, I want to demonstrate some of the actual reading tools we have. So it's all well and good to do conversion and to do editing and cleanup, but what do we have for reading content and publishing the stuff online? So we have the Lens Gallery reader, and this has been extended by Dulip to support book elements as well. So that's the bits is, I don't remember what that acronym stands for, but I think the B is book, and it's basically JATS for books. It's my very low-tech way of explaining it. And we have a demo of this here. Yeah, so Vitaliy, sorry, Dulip. Oh, let's see, can I just say this? Yeah, here we go. So this is on Heidelberg's book publishing platform. This is a JATS XML file. It's just regular, well, it's JATS bits, I guess. And this is the Lens bits reader. And you can see this, it basically renders the JATS into HTML on the fly, provides a lot of extra neat functionality that you don't have to hard code in. So you can link to figures, you can link to references and all that stuff. And you also have the ability to sort of jump to media here, jump to your references here. You can, I think, see full screen, yeah. Check out your footnotes, all that stuff. There's a lot of really neat additional functionality here, and this is where I think some of the capability of JATS is, is really kind of in the display end of things too. So there are some limitations to the Lens reader right now. The biggest one, I think, is just that it's not super readable mobile. So you have to use an iPad or above. You can't sort of read a Lens article on your phone. But it's in real use now. And then there's the code here as well. And we'll, again, all of this stuff is in the links that we'll provide. And then Vitaliy has been working on a JATS parser plugin. And this I kind of think of as sort of a compatriot to the docx converter plugin, in that it's a PHP only app plugin. So it doesn't require any external services. That will take JATS XML and render HTML and PDF on the fly within your context here. The PDF conversion does require a little bit of extra functionality here, but I think most PHP capable web servers can support that. You do need PHP 7.2 or newer, and you need currently a Bootstrap 4 theme within OJS. So right now, I believe it works with all of the texture plugin elements, and then Vitaliy's got a whole range of extra development plans he's got sort of on the go here. So I've just got a sandbox demo. I should note Vitaliy's using this in production right now for his journal, and other journals, as far as I know, are using it. This is demo using John Walensky's demo article. So we can see this is just a straight up JATS XML file. You've got the ability to hop around here. You've got figure support, more figures. And then you also have this ability to generate PDF. And this all happens, both the HTML and the PDF generation happens on the fly. So this PDF is just generated one-off. Vitaliy is looking at caching on the server to help with sort of load and speed and all that stuff. But in his experience, it's been pretty good and pretty quick. The one caveat about this is in terms of adding your own style, you do have to know a little bit of code to do that. There's not an easy way to style this using your own templates at this time. It's sort of like it's either what you see here, or you have to delve into the code a little bit. But my understanding is Vitaliy is working on making that a little bit simpler over time. So just in brief, to kind of sum up, the next steps for us for 2020, and our deadline here is, I think, November. We want to release the current tools that I just demonstrated. Maybe some of them are still in beta, but I think by November 2020, they'll be released in production. We want to develop a common evaluation framework for all of this stuff, so we can actually, for editors and for interested institutions, we can let them compare them easily against each other. So, for example, if you know what your JATS environment, what your JATS user story use cases are going to be, you should be able to go to PKP and say, of these tools, which one best suits my use case, and get a relatively quick answer from the documentation. For 2021, we want to, and this is actually 2021 plus, we want to work on that prose mirror element that I mentioned earlier. So this is to really develop the tools sort of directly within OJS, within a document-centric format. And the overarching goal here is to have an environment that supports JATS XML front matter, body, and references in a way that authors and editors actually don't really even have to realize that it's JATS in the back end. So the idea being they go to OJS, they submit an article, they copy and paste or just start typing into a window. They move on from there, they manage the references, they make sure the metadata all looks good. And at the end, you have an actually fully compliant, fully displayable JATS XML file. It's available for other services and tools and all that stuff. And then finally, just ongoing, we want to continue working with the larger community here. So in particular, Growbid. We do have a lot of investments within the Coalition Publica environment in continuing to work on badge conversion. I spent probably less time than I would want talking about that particular use case. But that's a big one for us within Canada. And I think that's one sort of that deserves further discussion as well. So the Growbid tool we still see as a really useful tool, just maybe not for day-to-day journal editing. Continue working with JATS for R and the other informal community discussion groups as well. So that's it. Thank you. We do have a list of resources here. And we have test information. Again, don't feel like you have to screenshot this or write it down because the next slide, we have a link to these slides here, so you can just grab that. I have some questions here that we can start with if there aren't any, but I actually do see there are some questions. So maybe we can just go over to those.